on personalization and customer experience, the rise of automation and AI-powered marketing, increased evolution of social media landscape, data-driven marketing with privacy controls, rise of video marketing. These are some factors impacting our professional and personal lives, and B2B and B2C, all companies are trying to explore them in their marketing plans. I'm sure yours is too. Hello, I am Arvinder Kaur, Vice President Marketing at Grazitti Interactive, and I extend a warm welcome to you all joining us on the webinar today around a very interesting topic, trends and predictions for marketing in 2024. Well, I see a lot of marketers, some business executives, general management, and service leaders in the audience today. And I'm so happy to see you here because this webinar is specially tailored for you. Talking about my company, Grazitti Interactive designs, delivers, and deploys intelligent digital engines to power businesses of all sizes. With extensive experience in enriching customer interactions, designing engaging communities, and enabling digital marketing plans, our team of experts help customers in customer acquisition and experience management through a global support model and blending of onshore and offshore presence. You can know more about us on www.grazitti.com, besides our LinkedIn, X, and Instagram handles. It has been our endeavor to continuously reinvent ourselves, refine our practices, and reform our operations to keep pace with emerging trends and adopt new technologies, able to serve the digital innovation needs of over 1,000 global customers we have. And in this attempt, we research extensively to track latest technology and industry trends, often impacting marketing, sales, and other support functions. Today, in this webinar today, we are going to explore the marketing trends and predictions that will mark their relevance in the current year. And for that, we have David Edelman and Amisha Gandhi with us joining today to share their expert opinions with all of you. Let me take a moment to introduce them to all our audience. Welcome, David. David has about 30 years of experience as Chief Marketing Officer and has been building consulting business in digital and marketing transformation. He's currently serving as a professor at the Harvard School and is acting as an advisor to top executives in startups, private equity, and large enterprises. As our executive advisor, David is also enabling us to channel digital and marketing transformation efficiently. I also welcome our second guest on the webinar today, Amisha. Amisha Gandhi is a global marketing executive and a SaaS GTM leader. She's helping organizations across the world to drive revenue and market opportunities and enhance performance and long-term value. Welcome both of you, and thank you for taking time to join me on this webinar today. I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation that will leave a lasting impression on our audience. So let's get started. Let me ask you a question first, David. What have you been seeing as the major trends that emerge hot in the market in the year 2023?
So as we look back on the last year, we actually have to start from the fact that, at least in the United States, marketing budgets went down. They went down on average about 9%, given data that I've seen from Nielsen and corroborated by several other sources. So marketers are feeling the pressure to do a lot more with less. The pressure to grow has certainly not eased up, even though the budgets have been getting much, much tighter. We also see more and more technology that marketers are struggling to figure out what to do with. Of course, the hottest thing right now being GenAI. What can we do with GenAI? Mostly in terms of creating new forms of content in automated ways, but how can we also use some of the older AI machine learning tools to figure out how to drive better predictions, next best action models, segmenting our audiences in new ways? So there's still a lot of experimentation and trying to figure out how to piece together all these tools. The average marketer has over 30 licenses in their tech stack. And that's not just the big companies. So that's a lot of different pieces to string together. And that overload of figuring out how to get the best utilization out of those technologies is becoming a real challenge. And it's getting even worse because as we see cookie deprecation happening and it becoming harder to find people using third-party data in media channels, there's been a whole move to try to figure out how to match identity and creating this whole concept of an identity stack, not just a marketing tech stack, but an identity stack of different means by which you can create matches and find ways where somebody who's been on your website can be found out on the wild web, or somebody who has just in general interacted with you, you can find again in another channel. And so the various companies, a lot of them in the media landscape, are coming up with all these identity solutions, and marketers are trying to figure out how to string that together and match that with whatever first-party data that they have. So they're trying to figure out what's going on with GenAI. They're trying to figure out how to manage identity. And then they're also seeing the rise of new channels that are becoming more important, especially TikTok. From a social media perspective, video is becoming way more important now as a means to convey messages. And then we're also starting to see the rise of connected TV as a legitimate channel. TV, but linear TV is down, and most broadband, people who only own broadband connections, not cable TV only, is over 40% in the United States. So all of the opportunities for placing marketing in streaming connected TV means that's becoming more important, and those media companies are starting to add more tools to enable better targeting. So it's a combination of shrinking budgets, new GenAI experimentation, marketing technology, and identity stack that they're trying to figure out how to operate efficiently while exploring new channels. That feels very overwhelming. So 2023 was a tough year. There were definitely companies that figured out how to do cool things, but for the average CMO, and I've talked to quite a lot of them in my role as an advisor, it's been overwhelming in terms of how to manage things.
Sure, indeed. Thank you so much, David, there. Amisha, what has been your experience and what do you foresee as some of the trends that will mark their way into 2024?
So some of the things to, add on to what David is saying, right? People are really focused on costs. Last year, there was do more with less, right? And we're seeing some of that trend already, in my CMO networks and just the companies I'm working with. Again, it's not our budgets have increased a lot, but it's more about where are we spending to get more revenue out of the channels we have. And we also have to allow for some experimentation. We'll talk about that in a few minutes about AI coming on board, which was big last year, GenAI, right? And there was a lot of buzz about that. But really, what does that mean? How is it driving customer experience? That becomes very important. And, something that, during one of Oracle's big conferences, they just came out and said, hey, we're actually focusing not on net new revenue, we're focusing on customer upsell and customer getting more from the customers we already have. Because what's happening with spending, is companies are saying, we're going to double down where we know things are working and the technology investments that are working, we're going to double down there. We know what's good. People are not as apt to let's try something wildly new and spend a lot of money on it because I don't know what I'm going to get out of it yet. And so we're still seeing, that kind of investment coming from a very careful perspective. But then yet marketers are asked to hey, can you do more with less? And by the way, we need to constantly innovate to keep up with the competition. So I think there is this crossroads of spending will come back, I think, for probably towards the last half of this year. But now we're really looking at where you invest your dollars is people are really doubling down what already works and a tiny bit of experimentation, right? Because they have to, otherwise they'll fall behind.
Absolutely. Marketing cannot stay or businesses cannot do away with innovation, experimentation. That's what is evolution all about. Interesting indeed. David, you spoke about CMOs getting overwhelmed with so many different parameters. You talked about rise of connected TV. We have also been hearing about voice search optimization. We've been hearing, of course, you touched point on first party data to dominate, etc. So, may I request you to elaborate a little bit more on these key forces that are impacting the lives of marketers in 2024?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, one of the biggest ones is going to be what happens with Gen AI. So how are marketers going to move from experimentation to actually embedding it in their processes to use it at scale? And that requires changes in operations. I'll get into that in just a moment. But it does make you think in general about all of the processes by which content is created and how can you bring a whole new level of automation to bear on them. Now, what marketers are trying to balance in doing that is how much to just let the machines do it versus how much it's really going to be more of a co-pilot. And my bet is in the co-pilot category, where we're not just going to have an AI generate 10 versions just like this and you use them. People are going to be much smarter in terms of how they guide to where the AI is going. But the important thing in using AI is test and learn. And you talked a little bit about experimentation, Amisha. And I think this notion of moving more and more to test and learn is something that's going to get embedded at scale. I've talked for a long time about agile marketing. So the notion of having small clusters of teams that combine marketing strategy, analytics, creative, technology, operations together in pods, using from software 2-week sprint cycles in order to constantly get test and learn. Well, that becomes way more important in an AI world, because in an AI world, you need data to feed the AI. Because the AI has to understand what works, what doesn't work, for whom, when, and the AI needs to be trained. And the more you can generate data, the more you have to feed your AI and improve your algorithms. And this is not something that just simply happens. You have to change your operations to actually run those processes at scale in a constant test and learn manner. So I expect in 2024, we're going to see much more pickup of agile marketing and the use of that in order to take advantage of Gen AI. I also think that's going to lead to a growing interest in using all the AI tools, Gen AI, machine learning, to do more personalization. And personalization is the growth opportunity from AI. A lot of people talk about automation and efficiency and will we need as many people to get this video done? That's all legitimate, but growth is really important. And if you can start using AI smartly to create the right interaction for the right customer at the right time, that's going to drive growth. And marketers are going to need more growth. And I think there's going to be a lot more experimentation with personalization, trying to use test and learn to understand what works where. So I see that as a whole area. We can come back. Let's come back and talk about media afterwards, but let me just stop there for a moment.
Sure. Amisha, your thoughts on this point anymore? Besides experimentation and the marketing pods coming together to really operationally transform, would you like to comment a few more thoughts from your side?
I think when we're talking about spending, right, in 2024, some of the things that we may want to think about is, how you're making those decisions, right? But then when you're looking at, there was a survey just done by Forrester where global, decision makers, right? There's not as much, they're citing there's a lack of clarity and alignment, and that's a big key obstacle, right, in looking at this year. So, this inability to achieve goals becomes further complicated when we have to pick our top objectives, right? And always the top objective is ROI at 30%, revenue lift at 29%, and then source pipeline and revenue 27%. And yet you're told to, you have to do more with less, right? And then, on the flip side, in the report, purchase influencers are entering the buying cycle. Digital and personal interactions will become equally important, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth as well, is these digital interactions are going to offer back value into when you're being discovered, when customers are evaluating you, and when they're going to commit to stages in the actual buying process. And that's the data that we'll have to really rely on to really get to that ROI, to get that revenue lift and find and optimize at those points, right? That's in the B2C. And B2B, in the customer journey, marketers have to do the same. What are the touch points that are driving, faster close to one, right? Deals, not just bringing in qualified leads, but how do you actually close those? ABM, right? So you're going to see a lot more of that, and there'd be even more personalization throughout the cycle to keep folks engaged. And then as marketers, we're going to have to really look at that data and understand what are the turning points and where we're going to need to optimize and spend more and double down what's working and take away from what's not working as well. I think there's this really leaning into these stats and how we're going to make decisions. And then other thing to think about is global advertising, right? According to Statista, it's been constantly rising, right? Except for 2020, since 2010 it's been rising, but in 2026 it's supposed to reach $836 billion, right? So that will come back. And something else to add around this is, a trend that we're going to see even more is the creator economy and its effect on advertising spend. First, it was about content and co-collaboration with content, especially in B2C. Now, creators are actually setting up affiliate channels with brands, coming up with their own co-products with them. So it's going to have a big effect on actually advertising spend is another trend. So it's going to be quite substantial. So brands are going to allocate a larger portion because they are seeing a lot of ROI from their influencer campaigns in 2024. In fact, it's supposed to reach $13.8 billion this year, and it's going to reflect, and it's going to actually be increasing. So you're going to see digital e-commerce, influencer marketing, those trends, and growth is going to be fueled by this creator economy, because they're able to drive not only brand awareness, engagement, but they're actually able to convert into dollars, convert into revenue. So if you're, I work with Tracker and one of our biggest brands, L'Oreal, right? And looking at Malia hotels, they're able to get bookings directly from influencers. L'Oreal is, with all their brands, are able to sell through their influencers. Their influencers are able to put up links and say, you can come here and connect with us, see us trying. You like this product, you like the color, it can look good on you too. And it really encourages that flow. And you're going to see even more of a shift in advertising and spending from traditional media to more digital channels, right? So, and it's not just with the creator economy, but brands are really diverting the regular from traditional TV, from print and radio. That's been shifting for a long time, and it's going to be even happening more because we saw that shift in COVID. People got really, nobody could go anywhere. So people got used to doing everything online. And so that really was a key turning point in pushing even more to digital and more to digital buying. So, digital advertising is now going to account for 70% of total media by the end of this year. To think about that, that's such a huge shift in the paradigm. And then measurement and ROI optimization, right? So as we're looking at investing in different mechanisms, whether it's influencer marketing, digital, there is even more of an emphasis on marketers for measurement and ROI optimization. We're being called into meetings to lead go-to-market now, not just be a player in there, right? And brands are really leveraging data analytic tools and platforms. So you're going to see investment in where I can figure out where I'm getting my ROI and how I can track those trends for my business, and how am I going to optimize my spend. So if you're in a business of doing that, then those companies will do well because they're going to provide a lot of value, not only to marketers, but to the business. And that's what we're really on the hook for, right? Always is to come back and to do that. So, advertisers regard the internet as the most important medium, right? So it's accounting for 62% of total media ad spend in just 2022. And now we're looking at mobile devices. So mobile internet advertising is the most heavily invested subsector of digital advertising. Everybody's on the go. You have an iPad, you have your Android, whatever you have, people are on the go, and it's being used for work as well. Right. So that is how we're connecting with people now, even on the go. So that's something to think about as well. So the spending is forecasted to increase from $276 billion in 2020 to, by the end of this year, to $495 billion. Think about that in digital advertising. So there's definitely a huge shift.
Whooping numbers indeed. Yeah, I mean, Amisha, you touched on some very powerful facts like digital advertising going to account for 70% of advertising. Of course, we realize influencer marketing is taking center stage. A lot of evolution there. Digital channels integration back into the marketing, and AI is playing a very significant role everywhere in the lives of marketing, especially. Companies are leveraging AI, adopting AI. Well, some are testing waters still. Some are experiencing hiccups, adverse effects, and therefore cybersecurity, some controls around privacy. Those are also the factors that are impacting and are in the minds of CMOs or business leaders when they're considering adoption of more and more AI tools in their work life. David, AI peaked. We all accept it. It's no more just a fad. It is very much part of our lives, and we are all embracing it, adopting in the way we can. It has become a game changer for us. What have been your insights a little bit more into the US market, especially in terms of how some companies are experimenting, their adoption rates, and any risks that they foresee with that?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, I think the hype on AI may peak, but I think the use is still has incredible runway. So let's separate out different kinds of uses of AI, because there's GenAI, but there's a number of different pieces to it. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, AI needs data, and AI can actually help you create data. It can help you integrate data. So give you a couple of examples of how companies are using that. So there is a small startup called DataOrb. And DataOrb takes all of the interactions that are happening in your call center and takes all those and digitizes that through natural language processing so that marketers can understand what people are asking about, the tone they're asking about, the kinds of comparisons they're asking for. They also know individuals and what they're asking, and they can use that for targeting. So they're creating new data out of conversations. There's another company called Narrative that allows you to combine databases using AI. It looks at one database, understands its schema, looks at a second database, understands that schema, and then writes the code to combine them. And then you can pump all of that into, for example, a CDP like Snowflake. And so marketers now can take data that was in marketing, sales, customer service, billing, and bring that all together way more easily than they could have before. So creating and combining data and integrating data is one way marketers are going to be using it. A second is analyzing data. So you've got huge pools of data. You want to find new kinds of segmentations. You want to find outliers who behave differently. You want to understand how customers are moving through their customer journey, for example. And so you have AI companies like Pointillist, which is a division of Genesis, that can find how Amisha is touching a bank or a telecom company through all the different channels, string that together, timestamp it, and actually look at her customer journey, and can find things like, okay, which are the types of journeys that lead to higher renewals? Which are the ones that don't, that actually create problems? If she's calling into the call center, what were the 5 things she did beforehand? Did something go wrong that's causing her to call in? So companies are starting to use tools like this to analyze things like the customer journey, coming up with new segmentations, and of course, trying to analyze things like next best action and coming up with those kinds of models. And those are getting embedded in tools like Salesforce and Adobe. All the next best action stuff is there. But there's other kinds of things like this, understanding the customer journey. Third area is activating all that data in real experiences. So this is where GenAI really plays a terrific role, right? Coming up with, for Arwinder versus Amisha versus David, what's going to be the right combination of font, of background image, of message, of timing, and generating all of that in a templated format. And that's coming into video. So there's a service I used in the early days of AI that's gotten even more advanced now called Sunday Sky that does personalized videos. And you can use that for onboarding. You can use that for cross-sell. You can use that to create custom videos as part of account-based marketing. And these are tools now that are not expensive at all, that are able to help marketers empower themselves to use AI to change the customer experience. And then the fourth, so I talked about data creation and integration, analysis, activation, and then there's optimization. So the constant test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, and getting things out there to understand what's happening. So a good example of a tool like that is called OfferFit. And a company, for example, it's in one of my articles on Brink's Home Security, uses OfferFit to create multivariate testing. So they can actually try different creatives, messages, offers, timing, set up all the test cells, run the tests, get the data back, and use that to power a GenAI tool that can come up with the right visual combination for the experience. So when we talk about AI, just putting that together, it's more than GenAI. It's all these different flavors of what AI can do from a data perspective, analysis, activation, optimization. Let's look at that, because that's how marketers embracing all of that, that's how they're going to create value versus just experimenting with tools that can create some cool content.
Sure. So David, I totally agree. There's lots and that can be done. However, I read that it is predicted that by 2026, 80% of advanced creative roles specifically, or will be tasked with harnessing GenAI to achieve differentiated results, requiring CMOs and marketing heads of different organizations to spend significantly on talent that has AI skills, which means no more totally depending on AI, but as you were saying, it's a combination of really being able to harness the value of AI, with the human element attached to it. What are your thoughts on this, Amisha? Have you been experiencing this amongst your circles of CMOs?
So, as we're thinking about 2024 and continuing to talk about, what David's talking about, personalization is happening. We have a lot of different, technology advancements that are happening. We also have not just AI, but we have augmented reality, virtual reality, we have blockchain, and these are reshaping a lot of not just business strategies, but marketing strategies, right? And that marketers, we have to stay updated with these technologies. And then how do we leverage them, to enhance our customer experience and also to improve our marketing effectiveness, right? So we have to talk about that. So when you think about these technology advancements, obviously everybody's talking about AI and automation. So you really want to think about those AI-powered tools. They're really revolutionizing marketing and business, right? Because you're going to start getting into being able to do highly and hyper-personalized messaging. We've already getting predictive analytics, and we have for a while from AI. That's nothing new. And then the automation of very repetitive tasks, right? An example of this is Adobe Adobe's AI platform, Adobe Sensei, right? That helps marketers analyze the data. It's analyzing the data that's delivering personalized content, and then it optimizes campaigns in real time while the campaigns are actually launched, and makes adjustments on the actual content, because it's able to see what's driving better engagement, and it changes the content in real time, and then it changes the content again to say these are the things that are driving better conversion rates, and constantly optimizing automatically. Before I would have to do it, or somebody on the team would look at it and say, content team would look at it and say, oh, these are working now that we've been out in market for 2 weeks. So think about the speed of how those campaigns are going to generate better AOI with something like that, right? The other thing that I mentioned was augmented reality and virtual reality. Those are still newer, right? But now with everything happening in AI, people are very comfortable using technology like that to enhance the customer experience. And it's going to provide a more immersive and interactive content. It's going to, again, be hyper personalized. And an example of that is IKEA came up with an augmented reality app, which allows customers to visualize furniture in their actual homes before making a purchase, right? So that leads to better confidence. It leads to things like reduced returns. So you can see how some of these technologies are going to help companies optimize and better offer those experiences. And marketers can then use that data to offer better experiences, better content, and better engagement for the business. The second thing I'll talk about is personalization, right? And the customer experience. So that is becoming important. I talked a little bit about that and how we're going to leverage the data and the analytics and these AI technologies, right? Because now you're really going to be able to offer something as a customer or prospect really interacts with you, how you can offer those tailored experiences based on those specific individual preferences and behaviors. Whereas in the past, we looked at a customer's ideal, profile, and we assumed that this person would like certain things based on trends and based on research. Now it's really tailored to that specific person, and they can, even as they engage with you and your brand, they will be self-selecting, right? From their behaviors, you will be able to determine their preferences. In some cases, through the interaction, you would pick up their actual preferences, right? So those, the experiences, like I mentioned, are driven by data analytics and even AI, right? And changing in real time. It's going to be really important because that is actually what's going to convert customers. An example of that, a simple example, is Spotify, right? Their personalized playlists and recommendations, leverage user data. It delivers better, music experiences, right? And it's increasing your user satisfaction, which increases your retention, right? But it's really demonstrating that power of content and personalization in marketing. Another uptick in this area is the use of, the community engagement and user generated content. What kind of content do we want to see, right? When it's personalized. And the best way to do that is have peer-to-peer influence, right? So brands are going to be leveraging community engagement and user generated content, and you can feed that into an AI tool, and the AI will learn a little bit more about the community and user generated content and be able to pull in the right user generated content to serve up to somebody. So think about that. I'm not looking anymore for that. It's being delivered to me, right? An example of that, it really fosters that authenticity. An example of that is Airbnb. Their experiences platform encourages their community, their hosts and guests to share their unique travel experiences, right? Which gives you that sense of community and trust, right? And then imagine if now your AI is pulling that and then saying, hey, I saw you looking at these properties. Here's somebody in the community saying this about their experience in like-minded places if you're interested, right? So that, again, that creates that further engagement and optimization. The other thing I'll talk about is the rise of voice search and AI assistants, right? So we've already seen this with Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, right? How it's changing how consumers are actually searching for information, but also how we interact with brands, right? So as marketers, we should really think about how we're optimizing our content and SEO strategies, not just for digital, but for voice search. and we should explore opportunities for voice-enabled marketing. An example of that is Domino's Pizza has a voice ordering feature enabled through their platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant. And this really streamlines ordering process. It's better and it's really convenient for customers. And it really demonstrates the importance of optimizing marketing strategy for voice search, right? So that's something else we think about, not just digital, but let's think about that experience that customers are having within that. And that's another way of thinking about technology. We're talking a lot about AI and all of these technologies, right? What that's going to bring in data privacy and regulation. So, we had GDPR in the past. We're going to have CCPA. It's really reshaping how marketers collect and we're utilizing data. We're already used to this, right? So, we're looking at brands like Apple's implementing privacy-focused features like app tracking transparency, right? To empower users to control their data. And that's really forcing us as marketers to be more transparent. We have to be more, ethical data practices, which already are, but now we have to look and say, are people really opting in? That's nothing new, but not just opting in. What is the kind of data we're allowed to use to really enhance the customer journey and we need to prioritize the privacy, right? And that's how you're going to maintain your trust and loyalty. With AI, there's already things happening in Europe around governance and the US, right? With AI, how much information is being pulled? Where is it being pulled from? People like, New York Times is saying it's our copyrighted information. You can't just pull it and serve it up to everybody because it's behind a firewall sometimes, right? So those are things that we really need to think about. And I think data and privacy and regulation, we're going to see more regulatory laws and governance around these technologies. So that's something that we as marketers need to take into account as well. And then another thing to think about is the rise of e-commerce and omni-channel retailing. So, I mentioned earlier, in the wake of the pandemic, it really transformed retail landscapes overnight, right? Everyone had to shop online and really people had to figure out their supply chains, right? So as marketers, we have to, again, prioritize those channels, but if you're, and invest in e-commerce platforms, right? Especially if you're not just in retail, but anything that you're selling, right? If you look at Amazon and other businesses and the uptick there and the reliance there, right? And you're, again, having to engage as marketers effectively through the multiple touch points, right? That you are seeing and to draw people not only in, but that journey when they're purchasing, right? You have to keep everything consistent. So an example of this is Alibaba did Singles Day, and it's like the world's biggest, online shopping event. They saw such a huge uptick in this event than ever before. And it really, shows that, hey, people are very comfortable with e-commerce wherever they're sitting. And people thought that they would never buy things online, getting things delivered to their home. And they got very comfortable with that. And coming out of that, they're kind of seeing the convenience that brought to them. And so now we're seeing, maybe people aren't going out as much to do those everyday things. They're finding that convenience. So as marketers, how do we usually think about omni-channel retailing and the rise of e-commerce? That leads us to sustainability and ethical branding and diversity and inclusion. I think a lot of things happen in the world, right, in the last couple of years. So customers are really demanding sustainable and ethically sourced products. Brands are having to adopt, environmentally friendly practices and communicate that out and show not only show their real commitment to sustainability. A good example of this is Patagonia. They did this "Don't Buy This Jacket" campaign. Right? It really talked about, don't buy this because it's made of this, buy this instead, right? So it was really about highlighting where things come from, where things are sourced, and not in the environmental impact of fast fashion. So you want to buy something that lasts for a long time. Inclusive marketing is part of this, right? So diversity and inclusivity is become a really big theme for a lot of brands and in marketing. And so, it's really not, it's about the reputation, the representation, inclusivity, right? We want to look like our customers. We don't want to just say we are. So Nike came out with this Dream Crazier campaign, and it featured female athletes breaking barriers. It was very inspiring, really to foster that community and to reach out and to show that, hey, we are not just saying we do this, we actually live and breathe it. And it really creates a positive brand image, but it really deepens your customer connections by doing the right thing. So those are some of the things that we really, really, really need to think about when you think about the key forces of change. We are trying to do more with less, but these are some areas where you're going to see an uptick in different technologies.
Sure. Wow.
Yes. Things. Oh.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I think some of the things Amisha brings up it points back to even though we have all this technology and AI and all of this, marketing basics are still incredibly important. And teaching at the business school, all the students always say, isn't marketing totally changing? Yes, tactically it is, but you still need a brand. You need a brand strategy. What is your purpose? How are you placing yourself in your customer's world? And what kinds of promises are you making? And how do those promises guide decisions that you take in terms of how you're going to use customer data, where you're going to source your stuff, how inclusive are you going to be? All of those things come from a strong sense of brand that has to then cascade through all those decisions about the segments, the targeting, the positioning, the experience. So, we can't lose sight of that. And I think it's just really important for marketers to make sure they're not getting just caught up in, the gerbil wheel of staying afloat with all these tactics if they don't have the grounding of who are they? What is their brand? Who are their customers? So, we have to make that really real. I just want to give one just very quick example that I think ties together a lot of things Amisha was talking about, especially in terms of personalization and customer experience and all, because I do believe brands that use customer data to help customers are already winning. So my town had a discount, tax rebate if you bought solar panels. And that led to an absolute flood of marketing in my town. Everyone trying to pitch solar panel installation. 40% off. 40% off what? And one came through that said, here's a personalized URL that will show you how to save 20% on your energy bills. Clicked on the URL, and I got an immediate image of the roof of my house through Google Earth with solar panels superimposed on my roof. And then along the side, a calculation given the number of panels, longitude and latitude, the orientation of my house, tree cover, how much energy those panels would generate on average over the course of the year. Then they went to Zillow, got the square footage of my house, and figured out a house of that size, how much energy you'd generate. So they had the numerator and they had the denominator to get me to 20%. That was completely personalized, all off public data. And they had me. And so they said, click here to learn more. I get right into a video call with a young guy who had all my data right there. Greeted me, Mr. Edelman, I'm here to tell you how you can save your 20%. He went through how it all worked. And I went through the process and I got it. And I didn't consider an alternative. The economics worked. The experience was terrific. It was all seamlessly done. That's what it's going to be about. It's going to be about creating new kinds of experiences with data that make things incredibly easy. So it's absolutely possible, but you have to really think about your brand and the customer experience.
David, you touched on such an important point, and I'm so passionate about brand myself, the purpose, the promise, the connection the brand can make with its customers, with its B2B clients, the segments, and how as a consumer or as a B2B customer, I would relate and consider a brand over the other. All this is circling around marketing strategies for a marketer, and there I can talk about first-party data playing a very crucial role in all of this. We are hearing about the death of third-party cookies, and that is changing the marketing landscape. David, to you, what do you think, and can you explain about why the first-party data will dominate in 2024 with the death of the so-called third-party data and the privacy-focused marketing How will that become the norm?
Well, because you can't track as easily with cookies. So several things are going on. One is this concept of an identity stack that I referenced earlier, where there are companies that are coming up with new forms of AI-driven, everything from understanding where you are geographically, literally down to a pinpoint given your cell phone if you're on your mobile device, to even just your click stream and how you do that. There's all kinds of ways. There's a company called Illumin that I have worked with, clients of mine have worked with, that has 6 different layers of identity resolution beyond cookies that they use to help you target individuals and manage your media spend against an individual prospect. So there are new tools emerging there. Secondly, marketers are trying to build up their own databases of first-party data. So they want to make sure they can get some kind of interaction, getting people to download an app, to register on the website, sign up for a loyalty program. Because once you get that first-party data, it gives you an opportunity to learn more about them. It may also give you a channel through the app, through the website, through permissioned email in order to reach them, because you can't reach them as easily through just the raw online. But then there's this new other thing that we haven't talked about, which are retail digital media networks. And that's an interesting reflection of the primacy of first-party data, because retailers have a lot of first-party data, and they are monetizing that now by selling themselves as media channels and as media placement agencies for brands that don't have first-party data, like OEMs and packaged goods brands. And Home Depot is going to have the best data for Black & Decker, selling tools. So Home Depot is building an incredible media business. They're on the record of already over $300 million in sales, aiming for $1 billion. So this is going to be a substantial part of retailers' value proposition, because they have the first-party data. They can use that to target on their own properties. They can create the kind of advertising capabilities like Amazon has done in terms of search results, pop-ups, videos on the site, but they can also use their data to find people off their site. And that's something we're going to see a big growth of. And it's going to be a very important channel. My bet is we're going to see upwards of 30% of spend within the next few years going through digital retail media channels. So I think all of this is changing the landscape on Winder quite significantly.
David, you're right. I mean, this is changing, and we, both of you have in the last few minutes already very strongly emphasized how AI has penetrated the various use cases and how personalization or marketing landscape is adopting AI. At the same time, we have read that one of the reports of Gartner stating that by 2027, 20% of brands will differentiate themselves as AI-free. There is a concern and observation about first-party data and AI-driven personalizations, though it is going to rule, but still about AI penetrating too much into our lives, and therefore some brands want to alienate themselves, go acoustic amid the rising AI generation, AI concerns. Any thoughts on that? Any takes around this?
Amisha, you want
Yeah.
to go first?
Sorry. Yeah. So, you're talking about, AI taking center stage, right? And there's like this concern. So you're looking at, it's rushing, you're getting real-time interaction with customers. The projected, Gen AI market size is 1.3 billion, right? By the year 2032 from Bloomberg, right? So it's underscoring the immense potential, reshaping the marketing landscape, right? So we have to harness the power of AI. And David gave a really great example. I've given some really great examples, right? So it's taking center stage. So we really need to think about and take into consideration what are the factors that are driving the journey, take into considerations ethical and governance and compliance, right? Into all of that. We're going into cookieless. What does that mean? So how are we going to continue interacting and making sure that Gen AI also meets these governance and compliance as well? So those are some things that we think about, and it's going to continue enhancing the customer experience, right? And that leads to things like the future of the digital store and other things, right? Where we're really using AI to drive online experiences and give the experience without actually physically walking into something.
And I think the point you're raising also, Arwinda, about people, like 20% of brands are going to go AI free. Look,
Yeah.
you know, rock music brought electric guitars, but many people still like acoustic.
Yes.
But you're also seeing, look, social media, you've got, the authentic voice of influencers. So, a lot of this is around maintaining the authenticity of your brand. So let's come back to brand. What is your brand? Who is your customer and how do you want to connect with them? And if you can't use AI to really be authentic, if that is part of the way, and however you define authentic, then yeah, that's going to be a path for some brands, absolutely, because authenticity is a key part of that platform. So I think, to me, that's more of a branding and a customer question, and it's an option.
And the other thing is, if you're looking at GenAI, there's now tools where GenAI is only pulling from your brand information, not just everywhere, right? You can direct and say, this is the pool of content that you're going to be pulling from, so that will represent the authentic voice of that brand, the authentic voice of its customers, because you're pointing it to a certain directory of content. So you're going to see a little bit more of that, where GenAI is not just pulling from everywhere, but it's pulling from specific sources, and only those sources, and that will allow brands to maintain their voice, their authenticity. And then the same thing with influencers. They can say, here's the top 5 influencers, only use the things where they've tagged us, and all of a sudden it's going to be pulling that into the customer experience only, right? So it's going to allow to maintain what it's pulling from it, just not going to pull from everywhere. Because if it pulls from everywhere, it's going to pull in garbage too, that you don't want to be served on behalf of your brand, right? So you also see that with chatbots and AI assistants then, where they're going to be having, your experience with the chatbot, it's going to be interacting with you, but it's only going to be pulling from the product database of that company and specific things, and I'll have the right talking points in place, so the customer is having the right experience and getting that authentic brand voice.
Sure, thank you. I read that, I read the 2023 Emerging Technology Survey, and according to that, 73% of US companies, of course, US is taking the lead globally when it comes to adoption of AI tools. And 73% of the US companies have already adopted AI in some area, at least in their businesses. And there are some 30 odd percent companies which are experimenting. The other 30 are still experimenting, engaging which ways to adopt it. So I want to just think about how many companies still want to remain alienated from this, and just be not trying and testing the power of AI in their businesses, touching their consumers' lives, etc. We touched upon lots of interesting points. Great examples, Manisha. Thank you so much. David, you too. I think let's take a few minutes to answer some of the questions our audience have posed in our chat. So if you can allow me to ask 2 questions or so from the chat box, let me move on to the chats and check that. I hope that's okay. Let me check some of the questions. Okay, there is somebody asking, how should businesses optimize customer analytics to deliver personalized or hyper-personalized experiences and recommendations for using AI? Anybody would like to, David or Manisha, would you like to help here, shed some light on this?
Yeah, I think, as I said, but one of the things I said before is a lot of personalization is driven by test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. And so you have to think about your analytics to do 2 things. One is look at the pool of data that you have and understand the variances in that data. What are differences in how customers are buying, behavior in them, and use tools to really do cluster analysis, segmentation, cluster analysis off of your data. Also looking for things like triggers that might be an indicator of somebody being in market. So there's one part which is analyzing the data you have. The other, though, is being able to support test and learn, trying to constantly float new kinds of ways of interacting with customers. So being able to set up the test cells, get the tests out the door, read back the data, use that to optimize your models. That whole cycle, you want to tie your analytics to make sure it can support that.
Sure. And David, another question, which is what would be the biggest concerns that a CMO should be thinking about, the challenges when it comes to adopting new marketing trends in the digital marketing industries that a CMO could be cognizant about? Any take on that, Amisha or David?
Go ahead, Amisha. Oh, okay. Amisha's got some sound problems. So I think the biggest challenge is keeping your focus on business value. It's so easy to get seduced by all these channels, these options, these AI, all of this. And always where marketers get into trouble is when they lose sight of business outcomes and what the CFO wants. And just get pulled into what might be cool, interesting, creative. So you really have to make sure you're using it with use cases that are going to actually drive the business, and prioritize those use cases based on what you think their potential will be. And so you always have to tie it. You can't just try a technology. Think about the use case. What do you want to have happen with your customers? And then use the technology plan to support making that happen to move the needle on your business.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the outcome also, right? Like, what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Do you already have tools that can do this? Because tools are always evolving. So when we review our MarTech stack and we optimize, we also ask, what are the new features? What are the functions? Can we get this from one of the tools we already have before we go out and get a new tool? Because we are just constantly adding, and then it looks like we're getting data from like 15 different sources. So then we actually have to pull all of that data analysis together to create a complete picture. And that can be a little bit of a nightmare, even with AI and all the technologies we have. They do very specific things really well. So we're in the marketing side having to cobble together these tools and analysis and data and figure it out. So we're pulling from many different sources. That's why a lot of big companies are using things like Snowflakes or Power BI. They're really pulling all these data sources together to create a complete picture, and then we can make a decision based on that, not just on one data point.
Thank you so much. At the beginning of the webinar, I said this is going to be an interesting talk session, tailor-made especially for marketers and business and leaders to know about how different predictions and trends in 2024 will impact their businesses. We talked a lot about AI, its advent into our lives, effects, advantages, examples, fantastic examples. Amisha, thank you so much. Thanks so much, David, because you really shed light on some of these factors and elaborated their impact on marketers. What can a marketer and a CMO be cognizant about? And thank you so much for answering those questions that the viewers also asked. So with that, I would like to wrap up this discussion. It has been great experience hosting both of you, talking to you here. I learned a lot. It was so well spent time, and I hope our viewers enjoyed this session. With that, thank you so much, and see you next time.
Yep.
Good day.